At number 5, we have a story from Ezzie, which happened on Friday the 13th, 2007. While her parents were out shopping, Ezzie and her friends decided they'd try to summon Bloody Mary. Never a good idea. Her friends had heard a different way of attempting to speak with her, and so they sat in a perfect circle with their knees touching. Ezzie's friends had made it very clear that they couldn't break the circle. She'd heard they'd be cursed or worse. They then all chanted, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, please may we speak with Bloody Mary." Ezzie's friends then flipped a coin, heads meaning yes, tails meaning no. It landed on heads. The circle of friends asked, "Please may you show us a sign that you're here." Again, the coin landed on heads. As it happened, a CD that they were listening to skipped, and it started to stick on repeat. The group began to feel dizzy and faint, and their vision started to go blurry. Remembering the curse, they asked Bloody Mary if they could end the summon and break the circle. They flipped the coin. It was tails. No. They started to feel long fingernails brushing across their face. The curtains began to shake. Terrified, Ezzie shot up and broke the circle. She slammed the curtains shut, and since that day, Ezzie has had a strange, creeping feeling that she's somehow not alone. Next up at number 4 is a tale from Nicole that has left her so horrified that she can't even type Bloody Mary's name. Initially, Nicole found it hilarious that people would believe in the urban legend. So, ready for a quick laugh, she headed to the bathroom, turned off all the lights, span around 7 times, and said Bloody Mary. She faced the mirror and waited in silence for something to happen. Nothing. Just as she was about to leave, she heard the soft voice of a woman singing. She turned back around to face the mirror when she saw a woman with long, dark brown hair soaked in blood. Across her neck, she had a deep knife wound. Nicole screamed. Anyone would. Hearing her, her brother started banging on the bathroom door, attempting to turn the lock. The woman in the mirror smiled, reached out of the mirror, and drew a deep scratch across Nicole's face. When she woke up, Nicole was in the hospital. The right side of her face was covered in bandages. Her brother had told the doctors that one of their cats had scratched her, and interestingly enough, the doctors believed them. Now, the weird thing about this story is that the very same night, Nicole's uncle had mysteriously passed away. She believes that the two are linked and that Bloody Mary attacks not only you, but your loved ones. Bringing it in at number 3, we have a story from Matty that took place on June 22nd, 1999. Matty lived in a small town called Newport in Michigan. Matty and his best friend Jake were only 13 at the time, but they were a curious pair and had heard people talking about Bloody Mary at school. It was around 10 or 11 PM when the pair were both hanging out. Jake decided he wanted to take up what everyone was talking about and play the Bloody Mary game. Bad idea, Jake. Now, Matty didn't feel the same, and while Jake headed up to the bathroom to do the usual setup for the summoning, Matty remained behind. He heard Jake cluttering about in the bathroom and then heard the familiar Bloody Mary chant. Matty says nothing happened for 10 minutes, complete silence, but he could still see the candlelight flickering from underneath the door, and so decided to head to the kitchen to get something to drink. When he returned, he noticed that the candlelight had gone out. The door was locked, and Matty frantically tried to open it. His dad came running, asking what all the commotion was about. Believing that they'd accidentally locked the bathroom door, his dad retrieved his tools and began to pick the lock. When the door finally swung open, they shrank back in horror. Jake was slumped against the wall with his head in a sink full of blood-red water. Yikes. Bringing it in at number 2 is a story from two friends, Dave and Jimmy, that highlights the real dangers of Bloody Mary. The pair were 14 years old, and Dave had recently told Jimmy that he was moving to California. His mum had gotten a new job. Jimmy was devastated. The pair had been best friends for years. He was going to miss him dearly. The thing is, Dave hadn't yet told any of their other friends at school, and so the pair decided to hatch a plan and make Dave's last day at school legendary. They would play the Bloody Mary game and convince their friends that she'd taken him away. In reality, Dave would slip out of the bathroom window while their friends waited outside. Jimmy would then run screaming out of the bathroom, cursing Bloody Mary. But that's not how it went down. The pair walked in, lit a candle, and chanted Bloody Mary 3 times in the darkness. They both stared at their reflections, blinking. Nothing happened. The pair said their goodbyes. Dave jumped up onto the sink to slip out of the bathroom window, but as he was halfway out, Jimmy decided to play a little prank. He jumped forward and screamed, but Dave was caught off guard. He lost his footing and slipped out of the window. Terrified, Jimmy poked his head out. Dave had fallen 15 feet and impaled his head on a chain link fence. Jimmy later told everyone that David had gotten spooked when he saw Bloody Mary, and so jumped out of the window in fear. But in his own words, he sees the real killer every time he looks in the mirror. And finally, at number 1, we have the legend of Mary Worthington, aka Mary Bloodsworth. In Boston, Massachusetts, during the early 1700s, there are prominent folktales of a young, beautiful woman who lived in a tiny cottage deep in the woods. There, she would sell herbal remedies and tinctures to the local villagers. Some in the village believed her to be a witch. There was a rumour spread that Mary had whispered to a young girl in the village to chant her name in front of her reflection in a pool of water. If they did, they would be forever beautiful like Mary. Soon, young girls from the village began to disappear. One by one they went. The villagers searched the woods, the farms, the barns, but there was no sign. That is until one night when a young family witnessed their daughter sleepwalking. Not wanting to wake her, they followed her out of the house and into the woods. As they travelled deeper, they noticed a strange glowing light in the distance. It was Mary Bloodsworth's cottage, and she was standing outside, calling the young girl to join her. The town soon caught on, and Bloody Mary was burned at the stake. Some say that she burned away completely, as if she was thin air. Others say that she was a reincarnation of the Tudor Queen, eternally cursed to possess another young woman, and her spirit escaped into the crowd. There are rumours that people still practice witchcraft at her graveside, leaving offerings of candles and 3 red stones. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. Coming in at number 5, we have the sinister story of Clara, Germana, Cele. In 1906, Clara was a student at St. Michael's Mission in South Africa. She was reportedly an orphan of African origin, but had been baptized as an infant, and at just 16 years old, Clara made a pact with Satan. She later went on to reveal what she'd done to the overseeing priest, Father Horner Erasmus, but in an account written by a nun, it was already too late. Clara was reported to be able to speak in languages that she had no previous knowledge of. Witnesses reported that she could speak and understand Polish, German, French, and any other language that they could throw at her. It was also reported that she had become clairvoyant, revealing many of her neighbours' most intimate of secrets. On top of this, she had seemed to have gained an extraordinary strength and a violent temper. She threw nuns around the room as if they were dolls, and it was reported that her screams resembled a savage beast, with one nun reporting that they sounded like a hellish choir. Well, the priest soon stepped in, and Father Erasmus performed an exorcism on Clara. It lasted an incredible 2 days, and at the pinnacle of the ritual, Clara was reported to knock the Bible from the priest's hand and attempt to choke him with his own shawl. Next up at number 4, we have the bizarre story of Ronald Doe. Now, people claim that the story of Ronald Doe is the true inspiration for the classic horror film The Exorcist. The story begins in the late 1940s. Ronald, who was 13 years old at the time, was traumatized by the loss of his beloved aunt, Harriet. His aunt was a spiritualist who had a fascination with the occult, and she taught him many things, including how to properly use a Ouija board. You know where this is going, right? Hoping to contact his recently dead aunt, Ronald set about using the Ouija board to make contact with her. Well, someone else picked up the call. In early 1949, Ronald began to experience strange things. Scratching sounds coming from around the house, water dripping out of the walls, and then he witnessed his mattress flip over by itself. Scratches began to appear on the boy's body with the letter X, which led priests to believe that he'd been possessed by 10 demons. That's pretty unlucky. After months and months of grueling exorcisms, Ronald actually survived the ordeal after reportedly witnessing a vision of St. Michael defeating Satan's armies on a great battlefield. Good job. Bringing us in at number 3, we have the tale of the Ammons Family. Now, this story is pretty weird, but whatever the true outcome, it led to one of the strangest cases ever handled by the US Department of Child Services, and many of its events are detailed in an 800-page report. It happened, it's weird, let's jump in. In 2014, mother of 3, Latoya Ammons, claimed to police officials that her children had been possessed by demons, a pretty strong claim for anyone. But, well, when a social worker and a hospital nurse came to check on the children, they witnessed Latoya's 9-year-old son walking backwards up a wall. Now, that's not all. Latoya says that the strange tale began with flies. Wherever the children would be, there'd be a swarm of big, ugly flies that followed them. And despite constant cleaning and repellent, they were still there. They'd also witnessed her 12-year-old daughter levitating above her bed, unconscious. suspicious. Seeking the aid of a priest, the children were reportedly violent and aggressive. They spoke in grave, beast-like tones, and the priest believed that the children had been taken into possession by a demon named Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. The police officer who had led the case publicly stated that it was the strangest, most unexplainable thing that he'd ever seen. No kidding. Next up at number 2, we have the story of Arne Ecklund. Now, this insane story of demonic possession reportedly lasted over several decades and followed Arne through her teenage years and most of her adult life. Born in 1882 in the United States Midwest, Arne had exhibited demonic possession symptoms since the age of 14. Raised in a Catholic household, Arne began to show strange signs during her adolescent years. She developed a disgust for holy objects, and it was also reported that she had a physical inability to enter a church. It is thought by the time Arne was 26, she was fully possessed by at least 7 demons. During a 23-day-long exorcism, dozens of people witnessed Arne do some pretty insane stuff. While she was unconscious, strange voices would talk in unknown languages. She would often vomit tobacco leaves and foreign spices, and she would verbally assault the people present with sins that they had committed in their childhood. It is believed that Anna's first brush with the demonic arts came from her aunt Mina, who was a reputed local witch and would supposedly prepare Anna's food with strange herbs. The amount of records on Arne Ecklund is insane, and her case is considered by paranormal scholars as the most abundantly documented case of possession in the 20th century. And finally, at number 1, we have the true story of Estefania Lazaro. Our number 1 spot is the real story that inspired the Netflix hit horror film Veronica. Have you guys seen it? Pretty good. Now, Estefania's brush with demons remains to be one of Spain's most mysterious unsolved criminal cases. According to her parents, Estefania had developed a slight interest in the occult, which gradually led the teenager to perform a seance at school with her friends. According to a witness, they were attempting to contact the boyfriend of one of the girls who had recently died in a motorcycle accident. And you guys guessed it, they used a Ouija board. What happened next was a series of unexplainable events that occurred over a 6-month stretch. Estefania would descend into a strange version of herself, often having wild seizures and visions, and she would snap into fits of violent rage, snarling and barking like a beast at her younger siblings. After months of torment, she mysteriously passed away in her bedroom. Her death was unexplained. Her parents later reported walking past her bedroom at night and seeing strange, evil-looking, shadowy people. And then, on the evening of November 27th, 1990, police received a frantic telephone call from the Lazaro household. Her parents reported tall shadow people that had entered their home, and they were terrified to go back inside. As police entered the house, they felt the same eerie presence that had plagued her parents. And as they entered Estefania's room, they found a crucifix laying on the middle of the floor and a poster that had been shredded by claws. They witnessed furniture quickly shifting across the room and doors rapidly slamming. And in the living room, on the floor, was a picture of Estefania that had fallen off the wall and ignited itself on fire, but only the photograph was burned. The frame, including the glass, didn't have a single scratch on it.
Coming in at 5, the Smurls Family. The Smurl haunting took place between the years of 1974 and 1989 and referred to claims made by Jack and Janet Smurl of West Pittston, Pennsylvania, who alleged that a demon was tormenting their home. Their first claims arrived in 74 when they alleged that their double-block home was disturbed by a demon that caused loud noises and bad odors, threw their dog into a wall, shook their mattress, and pushed their children down some stairs. And on top of that, even physically and sexually assaulted Jack on multiple occasions. In 86, the family brought in our favourite demon fighting duo, Ed and Lorraine Warren. According to Ed, the demon that inhabited the Smurls' home was incredibly powerful and shook mirrors and furniture after they tried to persuade it to leave by playing religious music and praying. Temperatures would drop, and the Warrens even claimed to have seen a dark mass form in the home, with the demon once even leaving a message on a mirror telling them to get out. The home was blessed by several priests, with one unidentified priest performing 3 unsuccessful exorcisms. Janet Smurl claimed the demon avoided the rite during the exorcism by moving between the double-block home and following the family to other locations. Now, the source of the family's possession was never discovered, with many media outlets claiming they were frauds, simply looking for 15 minutes of fame, whereas others believe the family invited the demon in on their own accord. What do you guys think though? Coming in at 4, Julia. Back in 2008, a case was documented by Dr. Richard E. Gallagher, a psychiatrist in New York who describes one particular patient that we will refer to as Julia, who he deemed to be possessed by a demon. She was a middle-aged woman who wore flowing dark clothes and was incredibly charming. However, she was also part of a satanic cult. The woman referred to herself as the queen of the cult, but as I stated before, Gallagher simply referred to her as Julia, a pseudonym he gave her. Julia had approached her local priest, convinced she was being tormented by a demon, and in turn was referred to an exorcist who reached out to Gallagher for a mental health evaluation. The question here though, and the question Gallagher wanted answering, was why a devil worshipper would want to be free of the devil. Right? Gallagher helped assemble an exorcism team and the group gathered in the chapel of the home. Reports state that the objects would fly off shelves around her. She even knew personal details about Gallagher's life, how his mother died and how many pets he had. Spookier still, even when Julia wasn't with Gallagher, she still found a way to reach out to him. On one particular occasion, Gallagher was talking on the phone with Julia's priest, when both men heard one of the demonic voices that came from Julia during her trance, even though she was nowhere near a phone and miles away. Gallagher went on to state that he had never been more afraid in his entire life. Coming in at number 3, Cheyenne Johnson. Arne Johnson is marked in history for being the very first person to plead innocent on account of demonic possession during a case that is infamously known as the Demon Murder Trial. On November 24, 1981 in Brookfield, Connecticut, Arne Johnson was convicted of first-degree manslaughter for killing his landlord Alan Bono. Now this is where things get odd. According to the testimony by the Glatzel family, 11-year-old David Glatzel had allegedly played host to the demon that forced Johnson to kill Bono. And after a number of tragic and terrifying events, the family enlisted our pals Ed and Lorraine Warren in a last-ditch effort to cure David of his demonic possession. The family, along with the Warrens, proceeded to have David exorcised by a number of different priests. It lasted several days, and according to eyewitnesses, the demon left the child's body and took up residence in Arne Johnson's instead. Now, of course, a claim like this would never hold up in court, with the judge ruling that such a defense could never be proven, and was therefore infeasible in a court of law. Johnson was therefore convicted, though he only served 5 years of a 10 to 20 year sentence. Coming in at number 2, Michael Taylor. Michael Taylor is a man who became notable in England in 1974 for alleging that he was possessed by a demon. Taylor lived in West Yorkshire as a butcher, and with his wife belonged to a Christian fellowship group. However, Michael wasn't all good, with him often admitting that he felt evil within him, resulting in him attacking the leader of the fellowship, Marie Robinson, verbally. Taylor's behaviour increasingly became more erratic, and as a result, the local vicar called in other ministers experienced in deliverance in order to cast out the demons residing within the man. I mean, a little hasty. A lot of people have a temper, doesn't mean they're possessed. Anyway, the exorcism occurred on the 5th and 6th of October in 1974 at St. Thomas's Church in Gorber, and was headed by Father Peter Vincent. According to Bill Ellis, an authority in folklore and the occult, the exorcists believed that they had, I quote, in an all-night ceremony, invoked and cast out at least 40 demons, including those of incest, bestiality, blasphemy, and lewdness. At the end, exhausted, they allowed Taylor to go home, although they felt that at least 3 demons, insanity, murder and violence, were still left in him. And they were right, because while at home Michael Taylor murdered his wife Christine, attacking her with his bare hands before also attacking their dog. He was later found by police naked in the street, covered in blood. At his trial, Taylor was acquitted on the grounds of insanity and was sent to Broadmoor Hospital for 2 years. And finally, coming in at number 1, Gottliebin Dittus. This scary demonic case takes us all the way back to the 1800s. Gottliebin Dittus was a 28-year-old resident of the rural German village of Mottlingen, located within the Black Forest. She was raised with Lutheran parents and had somewhat of an oppressively religious, highly superstitious upbringing. However, when her parents died, Dittus lived with her siblings and continued to attend service. But it was the people living nearby the Dittus home that began to notice strange noises emanating from the home during the dark hours of the night. Noises which sounded violent in nature. Of course, many people suspected abuse was going on inside the house, so people decided to investigate. According to reports, they saw things that they couldn't explain. Furniture moving on its own accord, strange thuds, scrapes, and bangs that seemed to be coming from inside the walls, leading them to believe that something paranormal was occurring within the home. Dittus began began to claim that at night she was being visited by the apparition of a woman holding a baby in her arms, and she was prone to having sudden blackouts, on one occasion going into an unresponsive trance-like state for an entire day before snapping out of it with no memory of what happened. Gottliebin was ultimately sent away to live with her cousin, and of course the hauntings followed her to the new home, leaving the other siblings in peace. A reverend was called in, who determined that she was in fact possessed by a demon after witnessing evidence such as fits, speaking in tongues, and intense bouts of cursing and profanity. Gottliebin even claimed that when she was younger, evil spirits had tried to kidnap her, but were driven away by the power of her mother's protective prayers. The reverend began the ritual of exorcism, which caused an escalation in the strange phenomena surrounding the girl. She became more violent, needing to be restrained at all times. She even exhibited horrifying vomiting, which included glass nails and blood. The exhausting exorcism dragged on for 2 years, with the reverend ultimately coming out on top, and with Gottliebin supposedly stating, "Jesus is victor." Coming in at number 5, Rosemarys Baby. Roman Polanski's masterpiece, Rosemary's Baby, set the standard for many cultist horror movies, particularly in the way it reveals the cult, using a steady and slow build and paranoia, confusing us as to what exactly is even happening. This 1968 horror stars Mia Farrow and chronicles the story of a pregnant woman who suspects that an evil cult wants to take her baby for use in their rituals. However, it is quickly revealed that her husband has made a deal with the devil for success in his acting career, and the price is offering up his wife as a surrogate mother for something truly evil. Satan's son. That's right, the cult uses Rosemary as a sacrificial lamb for Satan's grand return through his own offspring, and it is truly terrifying. The general sense of unease throughout the movie is why Rosemary's Baby is an absolute classic, and perhaps one of the scarier movies in the horror genre. The horrors depicted on and off the screen aided in the rumour that the film was actually cursed by the cult and summoned demons, with many incidents occurring off-screen to the cast and crew, including the slaying of Roman Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate, at the hands of the Manson family. Coming in at number 4, VHS 2 Safe Haven. Safe Haven is one of 4 sections in the 2013 anthology found footage sequel VHS 2, with the segment being directed by Timo Tjahjanto and Gareth Hugh Evans, and being the best section in the entirety of the movie. The plot follows a news crew composed of 4 members, who infiltrate an Indonesian cult in the hopes of shooting a documentary about their mysterious activities. Inside the building they find the walls adorned in bizarre symbols, school children in classrooms, and women dressed in white garments. One of the crew, Malik, then overhears that his fiancée Lena is pregnant with another crew member's child, Adam. Things then descend into total madness. The deeper the crew go inside the building, with Lena being abducted by several women, with the cult hunting down the crew members for sacrificial reasons. Now, with only 29 minutes to play with, Evans and Tjahjanto don't hold back, not even for a second, with the segment being insanely action-packed and gore-filled from start to finish. Not to mention it builds to an insane, gore-soaked climax that will shock the audience. Cult are successful in their demon summoning, with the beast making its grand appearance towards the final moments of the movie, and it does not disappoint. Coming in at number 3, we have Children of the Corn. Children in horror movies are already creepy, but put them in a cult composed solely of children, then you have a recipe for absolutely terrifying scares. Children of the Corn, based on the book of the same name by Stephen King, is a supernatural folk horror starring Linda Hamilton and Peter Horton, and is set in a fictitious rural town of Gatlin, Nebraska. The film tells the story of a malevolent entity referred to as He Who Walks Behind the Rose, which entices the town's children to ritually murder all the town's adults and a couple driving across the country to ensure a successful corn harvest. As the couple arrive in the small, seemingly abandoned town, they discover the congregation of children led by a girl named Rachel, with them performing a cultural birthday ritual for Amos by drinking his blood from a pentagram-shaped cut on his body. Amos has turned 19, therefore is considered old enough for his passing, joining their god in the cornfield. Now, while the movie as a whole was a little disappointing, it does deliver on the horrors of cults. Not to mention there were 7 sequels, with the first being far superior. The cult movie in turn gained a cult following, with it being a hit among movie lovers. Coming in at number 2, we have Hereditary. One of 2 Ari Aster movies on our list, Hereditary was a surprise horror movie, with the reveal of its cult being kept a secret for much of the movie, making it incredibly unexpected when it begins to unfold. Released in 2018, Hereditary is Ari Aster's directorial debut, with it starring Toni Collette and Alex Wolff as a family haunted by a mysterious presence after the death of their secretive grandmother. However, what begins as a sober family drama very quickly descends into a crazy supernatural horror. What begins as a slow burn quickly catapults into a disturbing horror after an incident involving the family's son and daughter, leaving viewers covering their mouths. As a result of the incident, the mother, Annie, is forced to turn to a support group member, Jones, for support, learning ways she can contact the realm of the supernatural. However, this has devastating consequences, with her awakening something that should never have been awoken. Viewers very quickly learn that a demon-worshipping cult are the true causes of the family's misery and pain. Worse still, Ari Aster plants Easter eggs throughout the movie as a way of warning us of things to come. However, saying that, most of us may have missed these subliminal messages, but what I can say is, the wall-crawling demon was revealed long before the last 30 minutes of the movie, with the cult being there all along, watching the family and waiting for their moment. The cult in Hereditary are worshippers of Paimon, one of Lucifer's most obedient devotees, who rules 200 legions of angels, and is connected to the Tree of Death, hence why the treehouse in Hereditary is so important. The summoning of Paimon is gradual throughout the movie, but when he finally arrives and seeks solace in the body of one of the characters, well, it's enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Midsummar. There are few things more terrifying than a cult in horror movies, a group of people devoted to a dark higher power who will do absolutely anything to appease the deity. No movie displays this as effectively as Ari Aster's Midsummar. Released in 2019, Midsummar is a folk horror film starring my queen, Florence Pugh, and follows a group of friends who travel to Sweden for a festival that occurs once every 90 years, only to find themselves in the clutches of a pagan cult. Now, unlike Ari Aster's Hereditary, Midsummar lays out its intentions from the very start of the movie. The movie kicks off with Danny discovering the death of both her sister and parents, with the incident putting a strain on Danny's relationship with her already distant boyfriend Christian. Not long after, she learns that Christian has planned a trip to Sweden with his friends to attend a midsummer celebration at an ancestral commune, so the group packs up and heads out. Things very quickly descend into madness, with the group arriving and being met by a large group of white cult members in a very peculiar white outfit, with Danny realizing that something isn't quite right here. However, her concerns are proven correct when 2 commune elders die by senicide via leaping from a cliff top. When the male elder survives the fall, the cult mimics his wails of agony and crushes his skull with a mallet. Yeah, things aren't fun in Sweden right now. Now, without ruining much more for those who haven't watched it yet, the cult does what is necessary to summon the dark higher power that they worship, with the American tourist being used as a sacrifice for the demon. Now, more interesting still, while this movie isn't entirely based on a real cult, director Ari Aster does describe it as a stew of sorts. I quote, "We're drawing from actual Swedish traditions. We're drawing from Swedish folklore. We're drawing from Norse mythology." All in all, Midsummar successfully draws on the disturbing conventions of cultist horror to generate a sense of dread and unease, making it my favourite folk horror movie and cult horror movie of all time.